Welcome to Clinical Data Talks, a podcast brought to you by CRS Cube. I'm your host, Sylvain Berthelot. Join me and industry experts as we discuss the latest trends impacting the world of clinical data. One of the trends in clinical trials currently is how sponsors consider the location of their trials, depending on specific needs or phase, for example. I'm very pleased to welcome Claudia Rodriguez to the podcast. She's the CEO of RARAS, a CRO specialized in conducting research in Latin America. Claudia uses her unique experience and deep knowledge of the Latin American market to help global companies run clinical trials in that region. And today we're going to discuss what Latin America has to offer to our industry, how a local CRO can make the region more accessible, and what it means for clinical data on a global scale. Hi,
Hello.
Claudia. Thank you for
Hello.
joining me.
Thank you for having me. Always good to talk about our region, and I'm very glad to have joined all your previous important guests. So thank you for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure, and I'm pretty sure we're going to learn a lot about Latin America. So personally, I'm very excited as well. And I might actually start with a bit of a dumb question, maybe, but for people like me who don't necessarily know Latin America, I mean, I know there are many different countries, but how do those countries differ?
hmm Well, that's a good question. Thank you for that. Because to start with, we have a cultural Latin America is like a cultural denomination for uh, something that is very different. We have Mexico, who's part of North America, like it or not. Many people may not like the idea that Mexico is part of North America, but they are Central America and then South America. And culturally, that denomination that I've never heard of that before I started working with American companies that included everything that was south of the border under the denomination of Latin America. And so we are, in a sense, tied by our heritage, by our Spanish and Portuguese colonial times. But so we have a lot of similarities from our past that we have inherited from our past, but it's a geography that is very diverse. We have countries that are a continent in itself, like Brazil, for example. It's a country that you have uh, 9 hours flight from the southern tip to the northern tip. You have deserts, you have jungles, you have everything in the middle. And there's a diverse population tied to that diverse geography. You have, Native Americans, African Americans, Caucasian, and everything in the middle. And you have, for example, some things that are not very well known about. For example, between Peru and Brazil, you have the second largest Japanese population out of Japan. And so that, for example, that allows for clinical trials to be run in those countries because that is accepted by the agency in Japan. So, and it's the region of 650 million people. And also something that is not very well known, but it's a highly urbanized region. 80% of the total population lives in cities. So people may think that, well, it's a huge region, they live spread out, they live in whatever, and but no, it's so that makes the region very accessible in terms of logistics, and to, well, from a clinical trial perspective, accessible to that population because it's in the cities. So it's there's one Latin America for everyone.
That's a very, very nice way of putting it. And it's
Yeah.
interesting because when I had the exact expectation that you mentioned, that when you said 9 hours from the bottom tip of Brazil to the north of Brazil, um, I felt like people would be very spread out, but actually
Mm,
that's not the case. So that's very,
exactly.
very interesting. So we're talking about clinical trials, obviously. So what kind of clinical trials do you see in Latin America? Is it very specific, or do you see many different types of clinical trials?
Well, the region traditionally has been a region with a lot of infectious disease trials. Has been a region of mostly phase three trials that, but because of um, global CROs using the region just to rescue their global trials. So it has always been a region for those very large trials, for oncology trials or cardiovascular trials. But that is changing now. That's something that we particularly us, and when I started with my partners in company, that was something that we were pushing hard to bring early phase trials and to the region, because when you participate in early phase trials, then you have the possibility to start working in the development path of that new technology. So thanks, I would like to think that thanks to that effort, there's a lot more trials, early phase trials coming to the region, and we've been helped for some instabilities in other, regions of the world that were traditionally destination for those early phase trials, but now due to geopolitical problems, those trials are now moving into Latin America, and I believe that's going to be a permanent trend. Mm.
Yes, and I mean the statement I started with,
Mm.
we really see that now
Mm.
sponsors consider the globe as a place to run clinical trials, as opposed to traditionally it was
Mm.
potentially focused on one specific continent, or
Mm.
a region within a continent. So that's quite interesting.
Mm.
What do you think attracts sponsor to run clinical trials in Latin America? Do you think they get any specific benefits?
Well, to start with, access to a patient pool that is eager to receive new technologies. Our healthcare systems are most public healthcare systems are mostly broke, but that's a reality in all over the world, I believe. So, and because up to 70% of the population relies on the public system, they are eager to participate in clinical research because they get, early access to trials. But for sponsors, it's accessing to a pool of patients that is nearby. As I mentioned, it's 80% of the population lives in the cities, and also it's in the past we used the argument of pricing. It's not just the pricing any longer. It's about that genetically diverse population that you can have in one place at the same time. And it's also a way to, how can I put it, soft landing into a region that will probably be your target region for selling your new technology in the future. So if you start with your clinical research, you are starting to develop a relationship with those key opinion leaders that are then going to prescribe your new treatment. And you're going to establish a relationship and understand the cultural nuances of, selling to a different region, start developing a relationship with the regulatory authorities. And that paves the way later on for registration. I mean, we receive we have received a lot lately interest from or consults from companies from Asia, for example, Chinese or Korean companies that they would like to register their products in the region, but they don't have evidence in Western population, and that it's a roadblock for local agencies, or they use criteria that is not prioritized by our regulatory agencies. So conducting the clinical trial is in a way knowing the patient that you are going to sell to afterwards, knowing the journey of that patient locally, and knowing how the agencies work. And that makes it a lot easier to register farther down the road. Uh, so that's basically it. And you have huge markets. As mentioned, just Brazil is 220 million. It's a very attractive market. The healthcare in Brazil, the healthcare sector represents $135 billion, which is almost 10% of the GDP in the country. And of that, 35 billion is of the 35 billion corresponds to the pharmaceutical sector, and is growing at a 17% per year. What economy is growing at 17% per year? I mean, it's a very attractive market. So people want to be there, but you have to start thinking early, not just when you want to ship the product to the country. It's the process starts. So that's why it's very attractive. I mean, you can recruit in no time, but there are other variables.
It's very, very interesting hearing you talk not only about the region, but also how you emphasize the need to plan ahead, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And Latin America is not necessarily the region you go to run early phase, and then you go back to your own region to run the rest of your program.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really planning ahead where you want your treatment to be approved and sold. Yeah, that's fascinating. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so, uh, so specifically thinking about the different countries in Latin America, are there any countries that are better for certain type of trials or certain phases, for example?
Yes, definitely. I mean, the countries, well, differ in the healthcare systems, differ in their characteristics of their population. So, for example, if you want to run a trial uh, um, in oncology, Chile is a place, for example, to be, because they have laws that have approved or give their population right to us access all the new technologies in oncology. So if you have a protocol that you need to compare your new IP investigational product with immunotherapy, in Chile, you have all the immunotherapies available. So you find those patients. But if you go to Brazil and you have would like to run that trial in Brazil, and you have immunotherapy as a comparator, the public healthcare system in Brazil doesn't have that as as a standard of care. So you're going to have difficulties in running that country. So knowing those particularities about the healthcare systems and the journey of the patients in each country makes you decide what country is better depending on your development. Or, for example, if you're a startup company and you are uh, seeking to develop early data for your medical device, um, Chile is also the place to go because the approval timelines are very fast. And if you're a startup company, you, time is of the essence because your funds, you are short on funds and they run out fast. So you need data fast to continue raising capital. So there are differences from country to country that we need to sit together and analyze what's better for you.
So we started saying, well, Latin America is big and there's so many different
Mm.
countries and cultures. But now I feel like we've gone back up to Latin America as a region. And
Mm.
tell me if that's not correct, but I imagine that when a client approaches you, you look at the region holistically to advise them where is best to run their trials. Is that correct?
Yes, it's correct. I mean, I'm not very keen in saying, or when I go to a conference or wherever I'm speaking about specific countries, because as I said already, there's a region for everyone. So we need to sit together and plan strategically about what's your main objective with your trial, where you are in the development, so we can choose specifically what are the countries that suit you best depending on the moment that you are.
So you said earlier that the patient population is 80% urban,
Mhm.
and I mean in other regions we see a push for decentralization, for example, or optionality for patients to uh, receive treatment at home or go and see their doctors. What is the interaction, I would say, between patients and their doctors generally in Latin America? Do they like to see their doctors?
Well, that's something maybe because of our also cultural heritage and Latin thing is that people in the region, uh, they see their doctors. It's they are second to God. I mean, it's God doctors, and so they have a very close relationship, and that makes that we don't lose patients to follow up. I mean, the region has a remarkable rate of people that continue in the trials. You never lose patients to follow up. Was something that happens in other regions, like for example, in the United States, that's a well-known issue. So people trust their doctors. They trust their doctors that, for example, if clinical research is the alternative for a valid alternative treatment for what they have, I mean, they accept it and they are willing to participate in the trial. But most importantly is that they adhere to the treatment and they keep coming back to the visits, because that contact with the doctors makes them, stay in their comfort zone, and they nurture that continue to nurture that relationship. So that's something it's very different from other geographies.
Very different and very important because
Mhm.
that's a key issue uh, recruitment and patient retention are
Mhm.
both big challenges in our industry. Okay, well,
Yes,
that's
it's also, it may be sometimes an issue because of that tight relationship. Doctors sometimes may be, resistant to refer patients to other sites when there's other sites, because they are afraid that they are going to lose that patient. I mean, that tight relationship gets even to that point. I mean, so I'm going to lose contact with my patient. It's that, and the patients all feels that. So that's something that, sometimes it may be an issue, but it's something that, overall, we see it as very positive if you work properly with that doctor or that patient, that to understand that they will not lose that relationship down the road.
okay. Interesting.
Mhm.
And is the clinical data that's produced in trials that are run in Latin America generally accepted by global regulatory agencies for submission?
Yes, absolutely. That's something that's also very, unknown. For example, Brazil and Argentina, they have a seat at the board of the ICH, the institution that regulates on clinical research. So they have a saying, they have a seat at the board of the ICH. And to have reached to that point, they have to they went through a process of adapting their regulations and the evaluation. So it's currently they can be considered high regulated agencies. So the data produced in our region, I'm just mentioning Brazil and Argentina because they are, well, the biggest in terms of clinical research, and because they have a seat at the ICH. But uh, data is very well accepted by the FDA or the EMA. The proof is that 85% of our clients are from the US or Europe, and all their trials are for registration in the FDA and EMA, and it has always been accepted, our data. So never had any issues, and also because there's such eagerness to participate in clinical research, sites, they pay a lot of attention to data. So the data is really of high quality. Investigators, pay attention to data producing something that's going to pass, the highest level of quality audits. So, and there are frequent audits from FDA in Latin America. So it's they are used to that, and they always pass. I mean, so we are very proud of. Also, something that's not very well known, but currently the regulatory timelines in our countries are shorter than the United States or Europe, or you can sign a contract in at a site here in 1 month, 2 months, and signing a contract with a hospital in the United States and going through the legal can take up to 6 months or more. So, there are also uh, opportunities in terms of using that data to register in those countries without going, directly to those countries.
Oh, yeah, that's another big benefit to invest in the region. Again, to make it faster and get to market faster.
Mhm.
Extremely interesting. Thank you for sharing all this. I just have one last question for you. What's the best piece of advice that you've received in your career that you constantly apply at work?
That's a good question. I think it's, be consistently authentic. You need to be authentic always and be yourself, tell what has to be told and not what the client wants to hear. And because people end of the day recognize that you are dependable. I mean that you are someone that they can rely on. And I'm not going to say, well, that I think that's the best piece of advice, and that's the corporate culture that we have tried to build in our company with my partners. When we co-founded the company, we always told ourselves that we wanted to build a company that we wanted to work for. So we are always, telling people, be authentic, tell the client what it is. It's not just the client, it's us telling. It's be authentic with our employees, with our clients, with the vendors, with the regulatory authorities. So you create, a consistent brand, a personal brand, that you are a person that you can go to, and well, you will have the truth. So that's, I think that's the best piece of advice. Where I'm not going to, fall in common places like quality and ethics and things. We are living in a world that is having a crisis of with credibility, and starting with our politicians and our leaders. So we need to do better. And the industry, the pharmaceutical industry, the medical device industry, the healthcare industry is also having a crisis of credibility with the general public. So we need to do better. We need to be authentic, and that's the company that we want to be, and personally the person that I want to be. So that's I think that's the best description.
I love that. And
Mm.
especially, like you said, we're even in a world where truth is not necessarily crucial,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I fully agree with you, and that's what we do. I mean, the brand of CRSQ is also based on authenticity. And
Mm-hmm.
what I find personally, because I'm directly engaged in that, is that it makes sometimes your work harder because other
Yeah,
brands are not authentic
mm-hmm.
and they will overpromise and underdeliver. But I think over time, authentic brands have the upper hand because
Yeah.
people will, first of all, trust what you say, trust that you will do
Yeah.
what you say, and the results will be as expected because you set the right expectations.
Yes, exactly. I that's It's a very competitive market, and I believe that in very beginning all companies are tried, to have values and everything, but somehow we get lost in the middle.
Mhm.
So that's and it's very difficult, to stay firm in your course, and stay firm in your values. So that's something that we need, constantly work on and speak up. And sometimes it's not all about money. It's about sleeping well,
Yeah.
and well, declining some jobs. Why
Mhm.
not? So that's where we want to be.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much for your time. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I learned a lot about the Latin American region. It seems
Mm.
to be an obvious choice to run clinical trials, so I'm
Thank
sure
you
you'll
so
see
much.
more and more.
Thank you. Thank you. Great opportunity. Great talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for listening or watching us. You can find more episodes of Clinical Data Talks on the CRS Cube website.